Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Again, my name is Owen Duffy. I'm the director of the Yeh Art Gallery at St. John's University, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all today to our program that we have with artist Azikiwe Mohammed and Queen's Memory Project director Natalie Milbrodt. Azikiwe Mohammed is an absolutely incredible artist who I'm very excited that we'll be working with at the Yeh Art Gallery next year. He'll be debuting a new exhibition that's a series of quilts that are inspired by Queen's residents' experiences during the past year. So Azikiwe here will be in conversation with Natalie Milbrodt, who's the director of Queen's Memory Project, a really amazing community archiving initiative that empowers Queen's residents to actually share and record their own histories, a very important project, especially during this incredibly seismic and transformative year. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Azikiwe, who'll be sharing a little bit of information about his practice, as well as what he has in store at the Yeh Art Gallery next year, which I hope all of you will be able to engage with the project either in person or virtually at some point. So that being said, during the conversation, please feel free to type your questions in the chat, and then we'll have time at the end for a little bit of Q&A. So thank you all for joining, and without further ado, take it away, Azikiwe.
Well, thanks everybody for coming to hang out, and thanks Owen and Natalie for putting this whole circumstance together. So when I'm making objects, circumstances, whatever the situation may be, I try to think about the people that are going to be seeing the work, the people that the work deals the most with, and how I can better help other people's stories get across. Because I suppose myself comes in there because I'm the translator, right? Or just the less of a translator, because that means that it's hard to understand the source material. Um, I've got an extra hand. Like when you see the people passing the bags of rice down the street to get into the grocery store, right? I'm one of the people on the line. So as we were talking about this upcoming show here at Yeh Art Gallery this following 2021, trying to figure out some ways to be that extra person in line, but who else is in line? And normally I would just go and just talk to people in Queens. You know, I just go walk around and be like, hey, how are you? What are you up to? What's going on? But that's a little tough to do right now. So as you know, Owen was helping me think through some of this, the Queen's Memory Project came up as another person in the rice passing line. I've got just a few slides, nothing too wild, for you to just look at while we chat, right? So this is a flag of a town I put together. So an easy way to describe it. The town's called New Davenheim. The name is an average of the names of the 5 most densely populated Black cities in America. Got some flag makers to do it. The American flag makers weren't super pleased, so it ended up being Canada. Because when you're talking to a company that has the Blue Lives Matter flag in their banner, they're not really open to much dialogue, I found. But the point being, trust the people who have the information, who have the hands, and have been doing the work before you. The object's going to make more sense, and the story is going to come across cleaner. So, in that sense, all of the other textile works that I make, the fabrics usually come from the neighborhood where the end piece is going to be showing. The subject matter that lives in the work comes from bars, restaurants, libraries, just like walking around and talking to people. And then I make a summation of whatever information that I'm able to gather, and then try to put something together. This was from Savannah, Georgia. They still have segregated cemeteries. Um, it's one of the only cities that has pre-Civil War architecture. So the city itself is super, super old. As such, the cemeteries are super, super old. Now, a bunch of the trees were whipping trees. I'd never seen one in person. Um, for us Northerners that might be less familiar with whipping trees, which I was one of them, it's a tree that a person would be tied to, generally slaves, before they were whipped for some form of infraction. And the marks from however long ago are still there, because trees' memory is very long, but that also wasn't super long ago. So what are these objects that can help you sort of collapse time? And this collapsed time is something that I think about a lot, especially right now when we're in the middle of what feels like still March, which was like 16 months long. And then it just sort of fast forwarded, and now it's almost the end of the holidays, which I don't understand. But sure. So, what are some of these, signifiers, tools, and means that we can pull time either closer together or stretch it a little farther apart? And what are some of these time markers that might be simple for some people and more complicated for other people? This is a piece called Two Ladies Taking a Beach Break, which beach days are very nice, or very um, simple to manage, as most beaches are public and free, but finding enough time to be able to do so when your work schedule demands otherwise can be a little more difficult. Trying to organize that time with a friend of yours that also has similar time constraints, that can also be very difficult. Managing your responsibilities at home. So depending on what your other back, less forward facing circumstances are, what can be a very normal and simple action and rollout can end up being very complicated and based. So when the last president was announcing his travel ban on a variety of countries, I started asking some of my American-based Muslim friends, do you feel safe going out in public? Are there places that are easier for you to get to or feel easier for you to go to? So one of the things that I heard the most from everybody was Coney Island. It's one of the beaches it's easiest to get to by train. Most of the other ones you need cars, and a lot of New York people don't really have cars. So this is my attempt at a Coney Island sunset. It's a little more ginghamy than, because I've been since I made this a few years ago. It's a little less ginghamy now, because the beach has been a place that I've been going as I've been um, driving around a lot, trying to just run errands in as safe a way as possible. Because if somebody's closer than 6 feet to you in a car, then you're in an accident. So it just like naturally distances yourself. So I've been going to the beach a lot um, during this time, largely um, based on being told that was a place that other people felt safe at. Last time, difficult circumstances came up. So trying to trying to figure out both what are the visual signifiers, but then also what visual signifiers stick to the stories that largely I've just been reading over, courtesy of Natalie at the Queen's Memory Project. Um, but what's something that's going to, make the most sense and paint as clear a portrait as possible of these past few months, but also the issues these past few months have brought forward, which have been around for much longer than just these past few months. That's it. That's it for me. I'm gonna turn it over to Natalie, or back to you, Owen.
You can turn it over. We can actually hand it over to Natalie now. I think she should be able to share her screen and some of her images as well. Thank you, Azikiwe. I'll have some questions for you to follow up, but that's, I think, a great introduction to your project and your thought process and your creative practice as well. So without further ado, Natalie, if you want to tell us a little bit about the Queen's Memory Project, I think that would be great. Thank you.
Me too. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this. I'm really, really looking forward to working with Azikiwe and just seeing what you all are going to produce together. And I hope that Queen's Memory can be a part of it. So I'm going to share a little bit of information today about the community archiving program that we run between Queen's College and Queen's Public Library. I'm going to share my screen with you. So Queen's Memory this year, we celebrated our 10-year anniversary. And with that, a very unusual, productive, heartbreaking, unprecedented year. So we actually have moved to an entirely remote team, doing all of the oral history and local history programming work that we used to do all in person, all remote. So I'm going to tell you today just a little bit about what the project is, and then also give you some sense of how people work with us, because we really are meant to be a set of tools for a community to be able to document itself. So these are some of the faces of folks who have contributed to the collections. These are my Queen's people. And there are all kinds of different ways that people have participated. So the most involved are the people who have contributed full oral history interviews that are life history interviews to the archives. And the least involved are people who maybe just come to a public program, maybe they know a little bit about the work that we're doing, and maybe share it with a neighbor. But what's really special about these materials that we're collecting is that by collecting many, many personal histories, you get a more complicated and nuanced understanding of a history of a place. So the more, the more experiences that we can bring in, the more people in 100 years from now will really understand what it was to live in this time. And then there are benefits for those of us who are living at this time. I mean, we can be living next door to somebody and have no idea what their life experience is. So I think, a lot of our mission is about helping people to kind of work that empathy muscle and get better at truly listening deeply to somebody, and learning how differently we all see things, and some of the things that, of course, bind us together. So some rough statistics is that we have about 600 interviews at this point, and we've been doing public programs since 2013. We began doing public programs after Hurricane Sandy, and we were really interested in helping our neighbors who were living in South Queens who had lost materials to storm damage, to try to preserve what we could, and help folks to, get some things scanned that had previously just been in physical form. So this big heart is representing all of the interactions that we have with our community. And the things that are at the top here are activities that people can do, without necessarily disclosing who they are. They can just show up to a program, that kind of thing. And as we get down to the bottom of our heart in the project, it's really a representation of the people who we work most closely with, the people who are representing Queen's memory in their communities and really being liaisons into communities that they believe are important to have a record of in the archives at Queen's Public Library and at Queen's College. So I'm just going to take you out to some of these links, and I think that Owen can maybe share some of them with you so that you can go to them afterwards. So the first thing that we'll talk about are just our panel discussions. So if you follow us on Facebook, we have our own Queen's Memory page on Facebook, and if you go into our events calendar, then you can see upcoming discussion events that we have. We often will have guests from community, and we also do training sessions, but take a look. Our offerings are always going on. We usually have a few programs a month, and we try to hear from local artists. We try to talk about issues. We just had a really incredible panel about food insecurity in Queens with people who are working on the front lines to do food distribution across the borough, and just asking them what they are seeing. So, a big part of the history that we're capturing is not only the past, someone's past, but also getting them to create a document of what it is that they're experiencing right now before they forget. So there's a lot that just becomes very ephemeral about experience, especially at times like these. I feel like during the pandemic, as one week went into the next, reality was shifting so much from week to week that it's difficult to look back 3 months ago and remember how that felt and what we were experiencing. So these programs that are just streaming programs, you can just watch them as streaming live events on our Facebook page, and then we also save them in an archival place. We also have been able to work with some media professionals to curate some of the archival contributions that people have made. And what's great about that is that it's a great entry point into an archival database. So researching in an online archive can be pretty involved, and people might feel a little intimidated by doing that kind of searching. But by having edited content like the most recent podcast that we created this past year, people are able to very easily just listen to some nicely edited excerpts that are from the mini stories that are coming in from across the borough. So our podcast this season is called The Borough We Became, and it's all stories that have come in about the pandemic. And this link will take you to the different places where you can subscribe. So anywhere that you subscribe to podcasts, you'll be able to find our podcast. And I would definitely recommend it. We were able to hire a really amazing team to work with us on that. We also kind of moving, into some things where people are starting to kind of interact, and we're starting to get some information back from folks as well as just telling them things. We do group story shares. What I mean by that is maybe, somebody is anonymous, but they do share a story with us. So for example, we during Pride Month a couple of years ago had a bunch of what is your Pride story cue writing prompts, and people just were able to write on a piece of paper their pride story, whatever that meant to them, and then leave it. And as the month went on, it was just more and more stories. And so you could come to the Jackson Heights Library, which is where we set this up, and everybody, you know, you could read the stories that people were leaving, which were sometimes just incredibly moving, sometimes anonymous, sometimes signed. And then you could also contribute your own story. So at the end of that, we end up with a bunch of stories that we don't necessarily know who they came from, but we can just, you know, digitize them and turn it into a PDF so that you can take a look through that, and that becomes the archival record. So the example that I pulled here was one that we did at the Queen's Museum. This was a day that we did that was on a busy Saturday at the museum, when they have amazing programming going on, lots of making workshops and stuff. And we had this Velcro map of Queens where people could like take off their neighborhood and pose with it in a portrait with their neighborhood. And then we had this this clothesline here of stories, which is a technique that we learned from Bridget Bartolini, who does a lot of work with, she did a project with us called Richmond Hill Love Letter, where she asked people to write love letters to their neighborhood. And so we had people writing love letters to their neighborhoods wherever they were from in Queens, and then they would just hang them with just, you know, simple paper clips. And so by the end of the day, we had all of these amazing stories that came from people, and it was a nice thing that little children could participate in, any age. You know, you can always draw a picture or leave some kind of story that you wish. So those are an example of something that you know, we might end up with something really as an amazing teaser that we wish we could do a full interview with that person. And sometimes we'll just kind of be hanging out at these events and talk to people and see if maybe we should invite them to participate in a full interview. We also encourage online submissions, especially at this time. I mean, there's a lot that you can do with Queen's Memory without ever having to come to an in-person event. So this is the Queen's Memory COVID-19 project, which I've mentioned already. This is a project that we've done with our technology partners, Urban Archive. So it's built in the Urban Archive platform, which is basically just a map of New York City. And we have these submission forms in all these different languages and information here about how people can contribute. And then if you click on the link, it will take you to the submission form. So you just enter information that will end up populating a catalog record and allow us to get in touch with you. And then you can upload a file. So people have been uploading photographs, videos, audio recordings that they've made. They've been doing beautiful writings that have been really moving and just a pleasure to read. And all of those things are then available here. We set them live. So if you go to, you know, any one of these points on the map, it represents a photograph or a story that someone has submitted to us. So for example, this photograph of this gentleman who passed away early on in the pandemic is contributed by someone who went to his bike shop and had his bicycle repaired. And it was just a tribute to a neighborhood business, a tribute to a man who, you know, was just like one of the neighborhood people in this contributors world who, you know, very quickly we lost in the pandemic. So some of the contributions are memorials. A lot of them are also just people sharing, you know, what's keeping them going through a time of quarantine, taking pictures of what their neighborhoods look like. It's just been incredible to see. So I would encourage you to visit this, this project page and take a look through some of the things that people in Queens have shared very generously. Another thing that we do are regular interviewer trainings. Our community coordinator, her name is Meryl Lagish, runs these weekly workshops workshops where people who are interested in learning how to conduct a good interview, whether it's something they just want to do with a family member or whether they want to contribute to the Queen's Memory Project by interviewing people who we either assign or who they know about from their neighborhood who they're interested in interviewing, can come and they can, you know, learn a little bit about us and they'll learn a little bit of skill building around conducting good interviews. So you can go to the Queen's Memory webpage and look on our events calendar, or you can go to that Facebook page and they're listed in both places. So those always go on and you can count on those. We also have a growing repository now of audio-visual collections that are up online and available. So we have this page that has our whole, you know, audio-visual collections, and they're in different themes. So we have a hip-hop project, we have our just general collections that are not on any particular theme, but that are life history interviews with people who live in Queens. We also have an LGBTQ history project that we did, a project with LIC Artists, which is a membership organization in Long Island City. And we did interviews with them that were about the gentrification of Long Island City, but through the lens of artists and people, you know, as people who were both making their home in that area, but also trying to have studio space and figure out a way to be able to have, you know, enough space to do their work and live together in community with other artists. We also have Memories of Migration collections. So these are all interviews that were selected for our first season of the Queen's Memory podcast, which was called Memories of Migration, and was all excerpts of interviews with people talking about their migration to Queens from all over the place, and talking about some of the different common experiences that people have when they're making that transition. So all of the full interviews that were excerpted in the podcast are all available in this collection. And we also have right now a Queens College retired faculty and staff collection that is a growing collection. But the one that I'll click into now is our COVID-19 media collection. So this is interviews with individual people. It's also compilations of video submissions that we've gotten through that submission form that I was showing you on Urban Archive. It's also episodes of our podcast, and then panel discussions that we've done and recorded. So this is really a big trove of submitted materials, things that we've produced. It's really cool content. I would encourage anybody interested in what has been coming in and wants to see a more kind of curated collection of it to check out these snapshots of Queens videos. So these are just kind of like you know, like selections that are coming in from the public that are on particular themes, and they're really great viewing. So these are also, of course, you know, they're a database, so they're full text searchable. If you do a search for just, you know, any you know, theme that you're interested in, or a place name or whatever, then you'll get results that will take you to content that's about that search term. So this is a really easy thing to use. And I will say too that we do have, for accessibility, we have transcripts that go along with these interviews so that you have some text to go along with the video, and they're all synced up. So if you click into these, many of them will have transcripts. Our archival processing is something that we do have some help from a lot of our community volunteers in doing. So this is a transcript like what I was describing. So you'll notice here in this interview with Bill Sales, that's by an archivist named Obden Mondesir, who is working with us and on the Queens College side. You can jump to any time code, and you can jump to any place in the transcript and it jumps to that part in the time code. So it's a good way to kind of browse through the text, see where it is that you are interested in listening to, and then, wherever there's a marker, you can just hit that and jump to, 7 minutes in, 6 minutes, wherever it is, and get to that different part of the interview. So this is, again, on our, it's called Aviary, the platform that we use. This is our AV collections. So that's how you would use that. And we have a lot of our volunteers cleaning up those transcripts. The way that we create them is by using a software called Rev, which creates a kind of AI produced text that always needs a human to take a look at it and clean it up a little bit. Now, we've always had some social media outreach, but in the past year, we've really ramped that up. And our Instagram account is really kind of our lead social outreach platform. And it's where we do the most digging into our collections, our archival collections, for really cool things to share, and also promote the upcoming events. So I would encourage all of you to follow us at Queen's Memory, and take a look at some of the cool materials that are coming in from the public that we can highlight. It's a pretty delightful channel. We have a great team. I'm my reporter, and Meryl Lagish, working on these selections and getting things up here right now. So that's another way too that we reach out to people who make donations to the collections. We a lot of times will just follow people, or chat with them in Instagram just with direct messages, and then encourage them to either use our hashtag or send things through our submission form. So we've actually come in contact with a very large number of our current volunteer group by Instagram. And there are some people who really just interact with us through Instagram. It's very interesting. And we also, I think that some of the things that Azikiwe was talking about, just his deep thinking about the way that he sees people's history and narrative, being captured, his approach is something that has really helped us. I mean, I'm trained as an archivist. I'm not an artist, and when we've worked with artists over the past few years, they've really helped us to push the boundaries of how we do things, implemented really creative approaches, helped us experiment with creative ways of storytelling and engaging with people, and just kept the work really fun. So this is an example of an artist project that we did with Naomi Kuo, who it's a quilting workshop. Actually, it was a series of quilting workshops, which is why I use this as an example for today. And Naomi led this group of folks through a 12 or 14 week workshop series a couple summers ago. And she brought in guest artists who were all from the Flushing area, and who introduced people to traditional making that they were doing, and that they had learned from their mothers, their grandmothers for the most part. And we made a story quilt that contained everybody's migration stories. And so this, at the end, was this enormous and gorgeous quilt. And we actually embedded electronics so that we could have recordings of people's stories in the quilts themselves. And so when you would push a button on the front of the quilt, you would hear the maker's story in their own voice about their family's migration story. So this was kind of a breakthrough for us. It was really a new way for us to engage with people, to get their stories. And what we found was that when people were busy with their hands, their conversation would flow in a different way than when they were just sitting still and talking. So lots of ways to engage. We also do a number of classroom projects. We're working right now with a class at the Queens College Library and Public History program to work with the Old Town of Flushing Burial Ground Conservancy. So this is a group that is interested in, honoring the history of the people who were buried in this area, and they've done a number of really interesting projects for 2 different semesters now, and they've explored the history and brought out a lot of information that we didn't previously know. So it's really a treat to be able to work with engaged community members and also students who have a lot of intelligence and energy to bring to the project and to bring those stories out. And then last, I'll just, say briefly that we, once you get into the kind of most involved work with Queen's Memory, it's about people who are, recording their own histories, whether it's, their family and then they're submitting those recordings, whether it's someone who's out on photo assignment who's saying, wow, I can see that this building is about to be torn down and they're going to build something else on this block. So I'm going to take a picture every week and I'm going to just record this year of it being demolished and something else being built. I mean, it can really be anything that someone feels is an important part of the history of Queens that they feel they should capture. We love working with long-term volunteers who continue brainstorming with us about things that they think should really be in the collections. And then lastly, we have an ambassadors program that, informally, we've always had volunteers who we consider ambassadors into different communities, people who maybe are like on a community board and they're also an elder in their church and they also have family that's from there. I mean, there are some people who are just super connected to their communities and they become, amazing gatekeepers and make amazing introductions and get people on board with realizing that their history is really important to capture. But now we've formalized this ambassadors idea, this concept, and we have a pilot program this year with a number of the people on the Queens Public Library staff who work in the following libraries. So there are 62 locations of the Queens Public Library, but in 10 of those locations, we're going to have a librarian who has pitched a local history project of their own that they are excited about doing. And we are in the process right now of training them so that they feel comfortable to not only conduct an oral history interview, for example, but also train a community member to conduct an oral history interview, or to have a story sharing circle, or to scan a photograph and make sure that it's a good enough image that we can put it in the collections. So these are the different neighborhoods, and then just very brief title of what the librarians there are interested in doing. And so I would encourage anybody who is from Queens or interested in Queens to take a look, and if there are projects that you're interested in, or if you see your home library and you're like, oh, I want to help out with this, please let me know, because we'll put you in touch with the librarians who are leading these projects. And we're going to be starting to see some programming from them as soon as January and all through this coming year. So these are themes that we'll be exploring more.
Well,
so with that, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Natalie. That was absolutely amazing. As someone who has lived and worked in Queens at different points in my life, I really am always impressed with how incredible the borough is and how the diverse amount of experiences that one can encounter in Queens. So thank you so very much for sharing that. And now I think what we can do is we can have a little bit of a Q&A before wrapping up, because I know I certainly have questions for both you and Azikiwe. And perhaps I'll start by asking Azikiwe, and Natalie, I'm sure you can chime in on this as well, but I'm curious about why quilting is such a compelling medium for storytelling and for sharing histories. Azikiwe, do you have any thoughts on that?
Sort of. Nothing original, nothing that anybody here probably doesn't already know. It's one of the oldest ways that people have told stories. They're collapsible. They also serve a physical purpose. If you're cold, you can just put them on. In the Underground Railroad times, when I thought of the Underground Railroad, I thought of it as very quick moving. Like you're just basically running until you get to where you're going. But I was told that's not the case. I was in Memphis a few years ago at this place called the Slave Haven, and it's an older, formerly slave house. A gay German architect came over from Germany a million years ago, got here, and was like, whew, like, ditch that persecution, and then found out about slavery and was like, well, this sucks. So he built this modular house, because he's an architect, that pieces could come off and then slaves could hide under it. But how do you get that message out? How do you tell people? So he planted an evergreen tree outside of his house, and now those are, you know, like Home Depot, you can they're everywhere, but his was the only one like anywhere. So on the quilts there was this weird evergreen tree, and like if you knew, you knew, but if not, then it was like a cool design that somebody put on a quilt, and they would be hung outside of people's windows. Generally the quilts were, to get from one safe house to another, was anywhere from like 2 to 3 months, because you like stay somewhere for a few days, few weeks before you went on to the next place. So it was like 2 of these quilts would be hung out at a time. And once you got the message of all 4, then it told you what you needed to do. Now, if somebody was looking for one of these, you could be like, oh, like I'm just drying my clothes. It's like a blanket I have. So it's, quilts have always been really cool because they, due to their utilitarian nature, can also hide information as well as putting it, as unhiding it, as sending it out, right? It can pull it back or it can push it forward. And that's not something that a lot of objects are able to do. You know, generally, stories once told can't be pulled away or completely divorced from what their original. So that specific use I find really fun, because like I get cold sometimes, and then I've got, you know, 3 blankets, you know, quilt tapestries that I've made that like I sleep under when my other ones are, I'm getting them cleaned or I don't like, and then I can just go hang them up, right? Like there's not a lot of, so that duality I find really nice. But sewing isn't difficult for anybody. Now you may not be great at it, but you can accomplish it. You can stick 2 things together, right? It's not going to be as clean. I'm not going to do it as good as other people that I've seen do stuff, but like I try, and you can, you know, you can get it there. So it makes it so the barrier for entry for a lot of people is very low. Whereas, you know, like painting's really expensive, it's really difficult. Drawing is just impossible. um, but like fabric, if you have clothes, you have materials for a quilt. You know, like there's ways to, so between its utilitarian use, it being a true people's medium, and the fact that it can be as present as well as it can vanish, are the 3 things that have always made me really interested and excited.
Yeah, Azikiwe, that's one of the things that I think I absolutely love about quilt making too, is the way in which it's so accessible. I feel like for so many people, it was always a part of their lives at some point, and they've encountered it in such a, you know, a tactile and real way that I think is really wonderful. Natalie, I'm kind of curious, because I think, and this is also a question definitely for both of you, is 2020, feels like such a wild year, and here we are approaching the end of it finally. It couldn't have come any quicker, I guess. But it feels like this idea of archiving and sort of beginning the process of documenting and then unpacking the history of 2020 is so important. And I feel like between the two of you, I'm really excited to see how Azikiwe, when we realize the exhibition next year, how this becomes a really unique and compelling way of interpreting history or representing that history. So I'm kind of curious, Natalie, perhaps you want to speak to what is, this is a very broad question, but what is the importance of an archive in this moment? And then also, Azikiwe, how you feel like interpreting this through the process of realizing an exhibition, how that also can change our understanding of this recent history.
Well, I think that our biggest goal is to be there for people with easy to use tools whenever it is that they're ready to sit down and unpack what has happened. And I think, what we did see after Hurricane Sandy, which was the only thing that came anywhere close, really, in recent history to the kind of trauma that people are experiencing right now. Some stories, people just were not ready to talk about it. They weren't able to talk about it and not break down for like months or maybe a year. So, we're really interested in being there for folks who have that sense of like, I've got to write this down right now because I'm not going to remember in a week. And that is definitely true. And we're getting a lot of really cool testimony that is in that kind of vein, where we're going to be able to look back and have a pretty good snapshot of kind of what was happening for people at different periods, different times within the pandemic, but then also, kind of being there and available for folks who need a little bit of time to process and then come back with their story. So I think altogether then, when we have this mix of people looking back, but also people just kind of putting down what's happening at the moment and not knowing what's going to feel important in the future, then you really get a nice kind of texture looking at a particular time in history.
Can I just say what Natalie said? That was perfect. The variety of tools and how easy Natalie and the team has made it for everybody to really get the information. Like, I'm getting all teary-eyed. Sorry. Woo! It's been such a difficult year. And like, I was talking to somebody that's lived here for less than 10 years, right? And this happens in New York for different reasons frequently. It's very rare that the thing that happens here, anywhere you go, you will also see. This is worldwide, right? But like, they're still rebuilding the PATH train from Sandy. And that like we're still dealing with the last, like, it's never over, it just keeps, right? So trying to figure out these different tools for resiliency in terms, like, because like people still have a hard time talking about it, Natalie, whether it's writing is easy because you can't hear tears. I have to write out cry, like you can't write, so then I can write stuff. But if English isn't my preferred language, then I can speak, like, just thank you, right? It's really important to try and offer as many means of saying, if you're interested in speaking, in communicating, that it's available, right? And I like to think, Owen, of this exhibition as an opportunity to include more voices. Some of them are mine, like the 10 or so times that I've hung out in Queens, because I live in the house I grew up in. I'm a lower Manhattan kid. I move around sometimes, but a lot of it's based on work. So if somebody's like, hey, go work over there, then I do. And I've been told to go to Queens, a handful of times. I've been going to Queens more. Sorry, I was reading a question. We will answer you in 1 second, Maria. So there's going to be some of my stories. Growing up in the city, a lot of my friends are from Queens. So restaurants, houses, locations, landmarks, things that matter to me will be my own personal starting points. But then trying to listen and then give another piece to the multiple pieces that Natalie and the Queen's Memory Project have already provided to this very, very large and complicated puzzle of resilience, stress, sometimes happy stuff. Tough. Trying to find some spaces for happy stuff. But I think, Owen, because we're designing the physical space. To answer your question, Maria, it's going to be a physical show, but we're going to do all types of virtual things to try and get your experience as close as possible to seeing it online as in person. Because as we see, there's a vaccine. Who's going to get it? When? There's a bunch of vaccines. Are they all cool? Are we going to, where is this going to be in a few months? There is zero answer, right? So it will exist in person, but whether or not anybody can come see it in person or feel safe doing so is, our concern, trying to make sure that everybody feels as safe and cool as possible and as we can. So when we figure that out, we will also let you know. We'll also let you know, Maria.
Yeah, and just to echo, build on what Azikiwe said, we were lucky enough to be open this fall. Of course, people had to make an appointment, and we had all sorts of social distancing guidelines, in place that were developed in consultation with the university. So we are at the moment, of course, we have to see how things go and see obviously how the university decides that the spring semester can happen, but we are planning the physical exhibition to open in February at the moment. And so in addition to that, you will, if you're involved with the St. John's University community, of course, you can come to campus, and for everyone else, you'll be welcome to make an appointment. And everyone that is here in this webinar will, of course, get an invitation to the exhibition. I'll make sure that you're added to our email list for that, and that'll have instructions for how to visit campus. In addition, if you are interested in contributing a story to that might end up in the exhibition or one of Azikiwe's quilts, through the online submission form that the Queen's Memory Project has, I think is a great place, since Azikiwe will be certainly looking towards that for mining for mining stories for the exhibition. So in the link, and yes, Azikiwe, go ahead.
Yeah, and when you're thank you, Owen, for also answering Maria's question. And if you're tossing in a story in any of the variety of means with which to do so, and you're interested in hopping over to Quilt Town also, just say something. Just throw a little note in there. I'll be digging around, but there's a whole lot of dots on there, so it'll be hard. And I want to make sure that anybody that feels like showing up in Textile Town, that there's a way that we can sneak you in there. So I'll be talking to Natalie as this goes on, and if there's if somebody flags something, then just send it over. But you're also allowed to just contact me directly. It's super. I'm not hard to find. Look, this is the thing. not trying to make anybody do double work, but that's just my email address. If you want to shoot a thing, or just like, ask a question, or just like say hi, that's also cool.
Well, thank you, Azikiwe. I think everyone definitely get in touch with Azikiwe if you want to be a part of this project. Please get in touch with everyone at the at Queen's Memory Project. They have so many great resources. Please also stay in touch with us. I know there was one other question in there from Laura Ann Walker. Is there a history of Shea Stadium? Natalie, do you know if there's a history of Shea Stadium? Because I would love to know that.
Well, I mean, this is where we could really use our archives reading room to be open again at Queens Public Library. At our central library, we have a lot of records about the history of Shea Stadium. And I don't know, I'm not strong enough about it off the top of my head to be able to just tell you, but there are for sure resources at the Queens Public Library, and you can find some things on the Digital Archives website too.
Oh, Louise just threw a whole bunch of stuff in.
I know. That's awesome, Louise.
That was very, 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 very quick and wonderful.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think at that point, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Everyone, Azikiwe, thank you so much. Natalie, thank you so much. Everyone here, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to staying in touch and let you know, when the exhibition is open, and look forward to welcoming you at the Yeh Art Gallery. We hope that you find a way to contribute to this project through the various resources that Natalie and Azikiwe have made available here. So thank you very much. And everyone stay safe up there, and look forward to seeing you all in 2021.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.